Hello and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow Masterclass, a digital-first platform where we invite entrepreneurs like yourself to join us and ask your questions live on a national platform to our experts across different industries and verticals. I'm Sunanda Jayaseelan. Today, we're bringing you part one of that digital exclusive that we did, speaking about the EdTech space, the impact that EdTech has seen thanks to the pandemic. What are the opportunities? What are the challenges going forward? Let me start by introducing our panelists. First up, we have Shweta Rajpal Kohli. She is a co-chair, FICCI EdTech Task Force. She is also the Chief Public Policy Officer at Sequoia Capital India. We have Gerald Jaideep, co-chair, FICCI EdTech Task Force and CEO at MedVarsity. We have Sanjay Agarwal. He is president at PhD CCI. He is also chairman at Paramount Communication. And we have Arjun Mohan, CEO of Upgrad. What's happening as far as the shift that we've seen in EdTech. This is to all of you on today's panel to talk about the fact that in the past 1 year, every industry has seen a sea change moving online. That has not been different, I would assume, as far as the education space is concerned as well. What have been those big, one or two changes? What has characterized that change? If you could kick today's masterclass off with your comments on that, across, and I know it's a broad brush to sort of sweep the entire education and edtech space with, but one or two things that you think has really characterized the change that we've seen in the past year when it comes to edtech. Shweta, I'd love for you to go first.
I'll start with a famous phrase from Lenin, which says that there are decades when nothing happens, and then there are weeks when decades happen. I think that in many ways summarizes what the pandemic has done to the edtech sector. And while education technologies in many ways were coming in the forefront, were gaining traction, I think the pandemic in some ways has sealed the acceptance that edtech is here to stay, and it has helped highlight the importance of edtech in improving learning outcomes, in being a great leveler in democratizing education, and bringing so much more in terms of how tech-enabled education can aid the entire sector. Let me specifically talk about, what we're seeing, observe as trends that are happening. So while with the pandemic and with millions and millions of children out of school, I think online learning became acceptable almost overnight, and I think that has been the big shift that we've seen. We have seen the acceptance that we had never expected would come at such a strong pace that has come in the last 1 year. And this is the trend that we believe is here to stay. So while everybody seems to be recognizing that, yes, education technology is an enabler, it is something that is helping students, teachers, educational institutions across the board, what the realization that is really setting in is the mindset shift that we've seen, as I said, the acceptance that we've seen. And that is something that is going to be here to stay in a post-pandemic environment. And there are a few parameters over which we measure what those trends are, what those numbers are. And I think at Sequoia Capital, at least, we've been fortunate at Sequoia India to have partnered with some of the most successful edtech companies across the board, whether it's Byju's, Unacademy, ClassPlus, Doubtnut, Eruditus. And the trend that we're seeing is that there is acceptance across the board. There's acceptance when it comes to K-12, there's acceptance when it comes to test prep, there's acceptance when it comes to higher ed, upskilling, after school. So we can talk about it more in detail, but Sunanda, I think the mindset shift and the acceptance of edtech is something which is the most defining trend of what the pandemic has done to the edtech sector.
There's a lot that we can discuss from that and dissect, but I want to get opening comments from Jaideep as well.
Thanks, Sunanda, for inviting me into this session. And Shweta covered actually quite of interesting points. But if you take a step back, COVID has been to edtech what demonetization was to fintech. The adoption and the acceleration of online education is incomparable over the last 1 year. From not only from the FICCI perspective, but also from the observation point in healthcare, what we're seeing is as more and more children spend time at home and are forced to go online for classes, parents are getting inspired. Parents are adopting that learning opportunity. Second thing is the demand for digital has gone up significantly across the board. Every organization today is investing significantly in digital technology. That is leading to a significant, it's making the gap in skills very apparent, not only in the school segment, but also in professional education segment. So the need for skill upgradation is very apparent to every user out there. I think if, this has to be built on, otherwise bulk of us and our education system will be irrelevant for the jobs of tomorrow.
Okay, Sanjay?
You see, I think the EdTech sector has been existing before the pandemic also. It's not that it did not exist. But what has really happened is that the scaling up of this, the ability of this sector to scale up so fast when the need came about because of the COVID-19 pandemic, that has actually been amazing. And that tells us that, okay, that we have been able to serve our children and those in need of education when the schools were shut and the streets were shut. But in addition, it's going to be something that will be here to stay, in the sense that even if the normal life comes back, there is a big part now that will continue to be played by the EdTech sector. That is going to be very important. And there will be many other aspects in which EdTech is now going to contribute, especially in terms of improving the quality in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, towns, or rural areas, where it might not be feasible to have large universities or the sort of teachers who can really provide the education, whether at the primary level or at the higher education level. So I think that probably is going to be another major contribution of the EdTech sector now, having proved its worth in the pandemic time.
Today's going to be an exciting session because we've started getting questions from our audience already. But Arjun, I want to give you the chance for your opening comments as well before we take questions.
Two things which I see as a big change, and I'm not going to talk about K-12 because everyone talks about K-12. Yeah. Now, I think pandemic has brought in another sector in EdTech out, which is higher education. So let me speak about that. Sure. Number one is, as a result of lack of options during the pandemic, a lot of fence sitters who have heard about online learning but never tried it out came and tested out online learning. And thanks to all the development which happened multiple years before pandemic, they found the experience quite inviting. So we were able to see almost 5 to 6x increase in traffic and literally 2 to 2.5 times increase in the paid customers as a result of it, really showing that even at that price point, there is an everlasting impact on it. So that's something which we saw and we are seeing is continuing. Second most important thing which I have personally noticed is the acceptability of online educations, online degrees, online certification at a very important stakeholder, which is the corporate, the hiring managers. Sure. So literally in last 1.5 years, none of the hiring managers have gone to campuses or done a face-to-face interview. Everything has been on Zoom. And this has changed perception completely. If you can hire a CXO level on Zoom and look at his resume on Naukri and LinkedIn, the question asked is, why are we really bothering about where did he or how did he do his education? Why should it be online? Why should it be offline? It can be online. Why not? Sure. This has been huge. And it's really reflects in the numbers, right? I mean, we have been able to do almost 2,500 career transition placements just in Q4, with, of course, with the help of our new subsidiary Recruit. So we are seeing huge acceptance. Literally, there are no employers who are saying that, okay, this is online. It doesn't matter. It's an IIT Madras course done online. It's a IIIT Bangalore course done online. So that mindset difference which existed has completely disappeared. And I don't think this is a change which is going back ever, because people have really realized that, oh, this is so convenient. Yeah, so that'll be my two cents.
I want to pick up on something that Gerald said, and he said, COVID has been to EdTech what what demonetization was to the fintech space and really talk about the changes that we've seen. This is open to all of you on today's panel, but I do want to talk about the fact that he also mentioned that are we getting ready for the jobs of tomorrow? Is that happening? Has the education space changed? I will come and talk about the National Education Policy 2020 and some of the changes there being proposed. But as we speak, will online and EdTech really help us then prepare for the jobs of tomorrow? Open to everyone on today's panel.
My commentary is going to be reflective of the healthcare ecosystem. Prior to 2020, 2019 and 2020, the inclusion of digital health, while it was happening at a national and at a global level, the overall interest on digital health was kind of low. Today, every doctor, I don't know when is the last time anybody went to a doctor and was sat in a hospital for a consultation. All of that has gone online. Yeah. Of course, healthcare is not, meeting a doctor is not just, digital health is not just teleconsulting. There's a whole aspect of healthcare, which a lot of doctors don't understand today. And doctors and the healthcare ecosystem has been one of the last to adopt innovation in education, especially leveraging technology. And we're seeing a significant shift happening there because they realize that this ecosystem realizes if we don't embrace technology-based learning at this point of time, chances are we will be obsolete, especially when competing with the digital natives, children who are graduating today from medical colleges who have far deeper relationship with technology than senior consultants or doctors or healthcare professionals.
I have to take a quick commercial break on that note. We're back in just a moment. Welcome back. You're with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow Masterclass. Tonight, we're bringing you a masterclass on the EdTech space, talking about the opportunities, the challenges, the national education policy, everything and anything to do with the EdTech space in the country being discussed on the show. Let me just very quickly take in a viewer question at this point. Manisha, he says he is a founder member at True Value Investments, is asking, why can't we have one board to take decisions? One India, one education system. This is to everyone on today's masterclass.
In an ideal world, that should be fine. But again, we have to realize that we have many languages and many local special circumstances. So it might not always be the one size fits all may not be the best solution on this front. But to the extent possible, I do agree with the sentiment that to the extent possible, one has to try and make it as uniform as possible, as national as possible, because that then increases the reach of the education, and that also increases the acceptability of the education that our children have across the world, because it will be one standard and one level.
While we're talking about, the upcoming trends and one nation and one board and all of that, I think it's also interesting to see again what EdTech is doing towards breaking boundaries when it comes to education. I think that's an interesting trend, but that has once again got accelerated during the pandemic. Today you have a situation when my children are sitting here in their homes in New Delhi and studying from teachers, whether it's after school classes or anything that may be in the US. Similarly, many of, the upcoming tech companies are working on models where teachers sitting here in India are actually teaching students anywhere in the world, including the United States. And given the fact that that's a huge opportunity for a country like India that has such immense talent when it comes to teachers. So I think that's interesting. And very quickly to your point that you asked earlier about, the trend moving away, I think what the EdTech industry is seeing very evidently in terms of trends is that it's moving away and moving well beyond K-12 and test prep that seem to be the two large buckets that in many ways defined EdTech. Now what we're seeing is workforce upskilling. Now what we're seeing is a lot of trend around lifelong learning. Millennials schools, wanting to bridge the gap between aspiration and employability. And that's the other area where we feel EdTech is going to help fill in the gap. And the other two very quick trends I'm going to touch upon and then let others also jump in is digitizing schools and educational institutions. Now, again, that's one trend that we think is going to pick up. For instance, one of our portfolio companies, K-12 Techno Services, is now assisting schools in a fully online school model. So we're no longer just talking about the shift from, to a blended model where there'll be online as well as offline coexisting, but we're saying, is this time to explore fully online? And then the third one, which I will quickly bring about, is also how we're creating opportunities for beyond academics. So we're talking about extracurricular activities in a virtual environment. So I think that's the other trend, which is a defining one for EdTech.
A second question, and this one is coming specifically to Gerald. I don't have your name, but he says he is the owner of a startup called Doer. He says, hi, Sunanda, I have a question for Mr. Jaideep. Healthcare professionals have played a critical role during the pandemic. What changes in demand for online healthcare courses has Medvarsity, for instance, seen in the past year and a half?
Very interesting question, I think, and it's very important to also, healthcare has been underserved from an education perspective outside of the regulated ecosystem, right? But over the last, till the 90s, India focused as a nation on infectious diseases.
Sure.
From the 90s to the recent past, the whole focus had shifted to non-communicable diseases, diabetes, cancer, cardiology, trauma, those kind of spaces. But India is still a bedrock of infectious diseases. Education itself in healthcare has moved on to more modern diseases because they're more lucrative, better to manage, and are more invasive. So, hospitals tend to make more money out of that. But the reason why Africa has been able to manage COVID significantly better than India is because they have very tight protocols for managing infectious diseases. So the shift that we're seeing in healthcare education itself has been back to broadening the base across all disease conditions. A doctor no longer needs to be an expert only in one set of areas, but also needs to understand a wider aspect of how healthcare influences a specific outcome. So an oncologist needs to understand the whole gamut of healthcare rather than just oncology. And in a simple example is 95% of pediatric diabetes is diagnosed in the emergency room because most GPs do not know how to diagnose diabetes in children. So therefore, education can play a critical aspect in improving the clinical outcomes given the varied kind of disease conditions or future pandemics we'll face.
Sure. This next question is coming in specifically for Arjun, but it's open to everyone else on today's masterclass as well. Surabhi Gupta has sent us this question and she says, all of the investments which are coming in are going largely towards tech-enabled schools, classes, etc., online, basically the model that she's talking about, I assume. What happens to the traditional brick and mortar? Will money chase the online education classes, schools, etc.? Then what happens to the brick and mortar ones?
I would start by saying that it's a perception that a lot of money is suddenly coming to online. See, online education, edtech, may it be K-12 space or higher ed space, these are all newer businesses which suddenly has started scaling. I would say you would have, the word edtech in India is less than 10 years old, that in terms of popularity. So, and typically because of that, there is a lot of news around these sectors. There's a lot of investment interest in these sectors, especially after the pandemic, when the brick and mortar, both in case of K-12 and in terms of higher ed, have not been able to function. Yes, there is much more interest coming in because people have now started seeing this as the formal replacement for the same. But from my experience, and this I will start by taking the case of K-12. See, personally, I don't really think that EdTech in K-12, in school system, can ever replace brick and mortar. Because school system fundamentally is a lot about your moral building, your social environment. It brings out the personality in a student. So I can for sure bet that moment everything opens up, all the parents are going to chase their kids to the schools. So that's not going to change. Where I'm seeing a big change is higher ed. Because and again, this could be something which is very fundamental to India. See, we are a country where the need for need for highly trained workforce is still very high. The supply demand gap is still huge. And what happens here is that once a student comes out of a graduation, a lot of times these days, good jobs are available. While they are in the job, I mean, once you start earning, it is very tough to go back to college and again skill yourself, right?
Sure.
So one of the reasons why masters or the GR ratios in the gross enrollment ratios in our country is so small is also because of this. There is always this requirement to go and start earning very early on.
Yeah.
What online, especially after the new education policy with the degrees going online, has enabled is give an opportunity for these individuals who have started work early to upskill themselves while working without any break in an environment, in their employment. So that brings out a huge change. And that has obviously, this test case has obviously brought in a lot of interest. So we will, I mean, in a few months, we'll get to know what will happen when offline and online together are there. But there are some really, really strong points, especially when it comes to upskilling sectors in the advantage of the online space.
Completely out of time on part 1 of this masterclass as far as the pandemic impact on EdTech is concerned. Part 2 is coming up though. So stay tuned for tonight. Thanks so much. The government was looking at holding most exams, online and online only instead of having physical exams. Is EdTech right now in a position to have enabled that? Is that a fair question to ask?
India is a federated structure. In this COVID crisis itself, we've seen different states announce different lockdowns, different examination schedule policies. But unfortunately, we follow one annual schedule for all exams, especially at say, for example, CBSE or ICSE level. If truly you want to enable EdTech to happen, there shouldn't be a linearity to education.
This is not a question of technology. It's a question of our point of view or thought process. And it will take a lot of time. Hopefully, this pandemic will be able to change it.
Hello and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow Masterclass, the digital first platform where we give you, the entrepreneur, the opportunity to be front and center in front of on a national platform, asking your questions to a panel of experts across different industries, anything and everything that matters to you. We cover it here on the masterclass. Tonight is part 2 of a masterclass that we did speaking about the EdTech space, the impact on EdTech because of the pandemic, what the way forward is looking like, challenges, opportunities, all of that being decoded on the masterclass. Let's welcome in and introduce our guest. First up, we have Shweta Rajpal Kohli. She is a co-chair, FICCI EdTech Task Force. She is also the Chief Public Policy Officer at Sequoia Capital India. We have Gerald Jaideep, co-chair, FICCI EdTech Task Force and CEO at MedVarsity. We have Sanjay Agarwal. He is president at PhD CCI. He is also chairman at Paramount Communication. And we have Arjun Mohan, CEO of Upgrad. One or two things that you think has really characterized the change that we've seen in the past year when it comes to EdTech?
COVID has been to EdTech what demonetization was to FinTech. The adoption and the acceleration of online education is incomparable over the last 1 year. From not only from the FICCI perspective, but also from the observation point in healthcare, what we're seeing is as more and more children spend time at home and are forced to go online for classes, parents are getting inspired. Parents are adopting that learning opportunity.
Rajesh Setia, he says he's director at TestFan India Private Limited. How will students learn life skill sets if they go fully online? What they should essentially and ideally be learning in person when attending school and college. And I think this is true even of primary education as well, not just higher education.
See, one part I do agree. If you look at the way Byju's as a product has grown, right, in the early years, our growth at that time was predominantly in the tier 2. It was almost, in the first 2 years, that's 2016 to 2018, 72% of my customers were from the tier 2, outside the top 7 cities. And the reason why I saw that kind of adoption is because these cities, as Gerald rightly said, did not have great schools, did not have great opportunities to learn and be trained for an examination like a JEE, but had access to a mobile phone and a okay internet connection, right? So that was, and if you look at the way we had innovated at that time, always the Byju's premium products were in a tablet, and it did not require a good internet connection to work on. It was offline. It worked completely offline. So to a large extent, that company has been able to bridge this divide with the help of technology. But if you ask me, that's one part of it, right? That's the content download part of it. We don't send our kids to school for just learning these concepts. It's about the life skills. And I really don't think, and this is my personal opinion, we can see in a few months what will happen. I don't think that people will just refrain themselves by going to an online school. Students would want to go back to school. Look at what is happening in companies today. We have started going back to our offices because we can't work from home anymore. If government allows us, we'll go there. The social part is a very important aspect, in my opinion. So I think life skills can never disappear, and it will be acquired from the schools, and they will be back in just a matter of time.
While I don't have a direct insight on the K-12 segment in terms of practical, lab classes and practical skills that need to be learned, hands-on through tactile touch and feel as compared to theory or concepts that you can learn online. The way we're doing it in the healthcare segment, which is also a very tactile field. When you're treating a patient, it's important to touch, feel, experience. If you're learning surgery, the angle of insertion, the device, everything else is very important. So, it's through also crowdsourcing a lot of inherent infrastructure that's around, labs, facilities. Can EdTech enable those infrastructure, which is available within, 5 kilometer, 10 kilometer, 15 kilometer radius of the student, be available to the student to book, Uberization of simulation facilities, which allows democratic access to this infrastructure, even if you can't travel 40 kilometers into your school. So it doesn't solve digitally, but digital can be an access provider to this tactile experience.
Okay, our next question is coming to us from Dhyaneshwar Bhagwat. He says he's chairman at DK Advisory and Investments. My question is, if everything goes online, what will happen to slow learners? Correct me if I'm wrong, but online education will be able to identify those who perhaps not keeping pace with the rest of the class and be able to fix that? Or is that a very simplistic answer?
I think the use case of online learning is exactly there. The personalization and customization actually brings out opportunities for such students. And put very simply as the way you said, it's online learning is actually going to help such people who will be able to rewind, redo it, who will be, the system will be able to identify such students with the right kind of questions and pace up the product depending on the pace which they can learn.
Okay.
Couldn't agree more, Sunanda. I think self-paced learning as well as visual learning tools, the fact that EdTech has allowed technology to bring about those changes and allow so much of that. I think what we're seeing happen is a trend that will actually only help learners across the board. So couldn't agree more with Arjun here.
Okay, I've got a question which is coming to us from Shakun Ram Asre Lal. So his question basically is, instead of cancelling board exams, why couldn't the government hold it online? I just want to sort of broad base it and say, if the government was looking at holding most exams, online and online only instead of having physical exams, is EdTech right now in a position to have enabled that? Is that a fair question to ask?
Okay, I'll take that one. Arjun.
Jaidev, I definitely have a very controversial answer, so I would like to comment after you say, please.
All right, cool. So, I won't bother getting into the technology aspect of it. We all know the answer. Yes, technology can enable it, right? But should we is a question that I'd like to answer. India is a federated structure. In this COVID crisis itself, we've seen different states announce different lockdowns, different examination schedule policies. But unfortunately, we follow one annual schedule for all exams, especially at say, for example, CBSE or ICSE level. If truly you want to enable EdTech to happen, there shouldn't be a linearity to education. Why should I do the exam every April or March just because the rest of my class wants to do it? Why, if I'm a fast learner or if I'm a slow learner, why should my annual calendar be the same as everybody else's? Unfortunately, all of our systems are defined in the brick and mortar format, and we are trying to adopt newer technology to the old methodology. It's like trying to design a car. Most of our cars are still designed like bullock carts, only thing 4 wheels and an engine. But if you really have to innovate in transportation, you have to do what Elon Musk is doing, right? And that's the moment that education is waiting for.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yep. The same point. Why should we even have examinations? Go into continuous evaluation. That's what it is. Technology can do it, but the fact of the matter is, I don't think our establishments will think in this direction. It will take years and years, because another system which could have been done easily online with the technology today is voting. Why do we go to the voting stations every 5 years? This can also be done online. We have enough security mechanisms to do it. So this is not a question of technology. It's a question of our, point of view or thought process. And it will take a lot of time. Hopefully, this pandemic will be able to change it.
We must talk about the national education policy. And is that going to bring about the changes that the education system in India so desperately needs? Any views? What changes? How should it really keep pace with the changes that are happening around us?
Sunanda, I'm happy to jump in here, and I'll be wearing my FICCI hat when I answer that question around the national education policy. So firstly, I think it's a hugely progressive policy, and a policy that really has the future learning in mind. I think some of the tenets of the policy, for instance, introducing coding from grade 6 onwards, those are things that truly make us understand that policymakers are realizing and understanding the benefits of tech-enabled learning, understanding how technology is emerging. So yes, I would say that it is a very, very progressive and interesting policy that we've seen India come out with, and something that is being discussed around the world, because India has really taken the lead when it comes to debating and understanding policy making in the education sector. Having said that, many experts have talked about challenges that may remain in the implementation of it, and I think that is something that is waiting to be seen. How practical are some of the suggestions in the policy? How are we going to see it implemented and executed? I think we can have a longer chat on that, but I'd let others jump in as well.
I'd like to add that some practical steps are being taken by the Education Ministry also. For example, the SWAYAM program, in which some more than 80 undergrad and 40 plus postgraduate non-engineering courses are being offered. I think they are also, in this budget, they have announced a national digital education architecture for admission, documentation, and automation, and so many other functions that they hope to, integrate. So I think ultimately the ministry has to do its job with the national education policy, and it's the education providers who, of course, are the actual people who are going to provide the education in terms, of course, in line with the infrastructure and the broad outlines that that the ministry gives in the NEP. So in a way, our chamber has also been very supportive of the national education policy. And of course, a lot is going to depend on how it finally gets.
Sunanda, if I can add to what Sanjay and Shweta were talking about, the NEP definitely has been very transformational, and I think it's a step in the right direction. Right? India has about 265 million school-going students, and NEP aims to radically address this whole digital divide and digital enablement of how these children achieve their educational goals, and therefore the gross enrollment ratio. If you were to take a step aside from just the student as a primary consumer and look at teachers who enable a lot of education to happen, less than 10% of the students today pass the teacher eligibility test across most tests. most states, right? Which means a significant amount of effort is being also spent through NEP on enabling teachers to leverage digital infrastructure, to leverage modern methods of teaching. In fact, as part of Diksha and Nishta on Diksha is a phenomenal platform that NEP has put together, which allows teachers to use the latest technologies across their schools, even if their schools are not digitally enabled, to leverage the best and teach their children best. I think this is a radical change, and I think it's early stages. And I think not only public, but also private institutions need to come together to enable this ecosystem to be significantly more successful.
I have to take a quick commercial break on that note. We're back in just a moment. Welcome back. You're with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow Masterclass. Tonight, we're bringing you a masterclass on the EdTech space, talking about the opportunities, the challenges, the national education policy, everything and anything to do with the EdTech space in the country being discussed on the show. This next question coming to us from Nikhil Kumar. He says he's the CEO of Young Learners Inc. His question is, will EdTech become and prove to be more vernacular friendly for those who are in smaller markets outside of the metro? There is definitely opportunity for innovation, but is that happening already, across all different levels of the EdTech spectrum? Anyone wants to take a stab at this?
So the best source for learners today would be Diksha. Set up by the Ministry of Education. Courses are available in 30 different languages. And I think my colleagues in this call and the companies that they're part of are all working towards, vernacular content across all demographies. And I know Arjun and Shweta can definitely say more on that.
You made a very interesting point, Gerald, and I just want to go back to that. In your previous answer, you were talking about teachers. So even as the entire model of learning is changing, are teachers really keeping pace with the changes that are happening? And, for instance, you see the Wipro University, which is doing so much when it comes to investing into teacher education and teach the teacher really. Is enough of that happening? And how quickly perhaps are those changes required if we want to see those who are teaching really keep pace with the changes and with what they're teaching?
From a learning methodology perspective, Sunanda, I don't think it's a question of technology. Sure, teachers are digitally savvy or can be taught to use computers, Zoom, tools and technology, right? But our learning methodology, instructional design as a principle is derived from research that was done in the 60s and 70s, where computers were not what they are today. So learning methodologies have to change, and basis which teaching methodologies will evolve. I think there's fundamental research in education that needs to be encouraged. Over and above what we just do on the technology side of it. I'm not talking about plain AR, VR. I'm talking about methodologies of learning, not only adult learning, but digital native learning. We are talking about a generation today who are born with a cell phone in the hand. Even in rural economies where there's only one cell phone per family, children use it significantly more than the parents do, especially in social circles. So how do you create an education framework that works for the digital native when it's conceived by the boomer generation?
I would love for this panel to really talk about where are the biggest opportunities as you see it in the education space, because when we're saying online education, we're not talking about a specific vertical, but there are opportunities across the spectrum. In the mid to short term, where are those opportunities according to you? This is, of course, open to all of you. Arjun, do you want to perhaps go first?
Although most of the limelight for EdTech goes to K-12 and test prep, because traditionally those have been the large markets, in my view, only a very small percentage of the Indian student population is still paying for these services. I mean, we are talking about 250 million school-going students in this country. And from my experience, what I've seen is that the major reason for that is the price point which exists today. A lot of these products are not at a price point which these people find it valuable. So I think that's one place, bite-sized content, last-minute services. I mean, giving a service when it's exactly required. A lot of people may not really want to take online tuitions for one full year, but they are definitely happy to do a revision class just before the examination if you can present it at the right time, right price point. I see a big, very, very big opportunity there for a tech-enabled ecosystem to be created. Second is the whole English versus vernacular language divide. Still, I mean, finally, most of the content which is selling in EdTech in India is English, and that's a very, just to open up the point you asked earlier. Finally, every company makes investment at the places where there is business. So it's a business decision and nothing else. But India is becoming more and more confident, and people from rural, people from tier 2, tier 3, who may not be very comfortable with the English language, but are still able to make living, that number is growing up now. I can see a large number of people who are very comfortable in learning in their local languages and making a living. So that's something which will become a big industry, just a matter of time. But honestly speaking, we keep talking about this sector, but it's been getting delayed more and more. But I think that it's definitely there. So these are two places where I see a lot of opportunity coming in.
To both Shweta and Gerald, I just want to read out figures, Shweta. $30 billion in 10 years is the projected growth versus 700 to 800 million. That's the size of the EdTech market. So specific opportunities, your advice for entrepreneurs, what would you want to do?
Absolutely, Sunanda. I think there is huge potential. There's huge opportunity for the EdTech sector. And I think we're seeing very evident trends. There's digital adoption among families, among individuals. You have 160 million households with active internet access. There is huge awareness and acceptance, as we said, of the EdTech sector. People are aware of EdTech. There is increased willingness to pay for EdTech solutions. I think that's the trend that we're picking up and we're seeing. And that's a very, very important aspect of the future and the opportunity that this presents. As I had mentioned, I think to me, the opportunities across the board. So while earlier we used to talk about K-12 and test prep, now you're talking about, whether it's primary, whether it is after school education, whether it's extracurricular, whether it's higher education, as we said. And, for instance, the kind of investments that we're seeing happen are investments that we're seeing across the board: lifelong learning, upskilling, digitizing schools. All of these are presenting with them a whole gamut and a very well-rounded EdTech sector now that is seeing opportunities across the board. And I'll just quickly touch upon the two other things you had mentioned. Vernacular, yes, again, huge opportunity there, and companies are making efforts to ensure, again, one of the ways you bridge the digital divide is that you definitely offer content in vernacular languages. We're seeing, say, Doubtnut do it today. We're seeing Byju's doing it today. So across the board realization that you do need to go vernacular in your content. And very last point, you talked about teachers and skilling of teachers. I think that's another huge opportunity. Again, at FICCI, we talk to governments all the time, and state governments have been talking to us about how they believe teachers need to be skilled so that they are better online educators. Similarly, our company is talking about how they want to do public-private partnerships today to help the government fulfill this overall objective of making every teacher a good online teacher and using technology and updating their technology as well.
If I may add to what Shweta was saying, Sunanda, I think, last year, between 2019 and 2021, EdTech garnered 22% of all investments that happened in the startup ecosystem, right? That's a significant investment in EdTech. And that's likely to go up as we get into 22 and 23. If nothing else, Wave 2 has proven the demand and the need for EdTech even more. And its integration into, daily life has become much more stronger. It is part of who we are now, right? Having said that, I think in addition to K-12, which is very, very interesting, very, very buzzy, and higher ed, I think the other area that future entrepreneurs or existing entrepreneurs should look at is the whole professional learning ecosystem. By 2025, 30% of the jobs that exist today will be obsolete. It means bulk of the people around us will need to get reskilled, re-equipped to deal with the world of tomorrow. And even if you look at the K-12 segment, what needs to happen, digitizing every school around the world, around the country, in every rural village, those skills have to be taught to somebody to go out and do that digitization. It's not going to happen because 5 people from Bangalore went there and did it across 46,000 villages in India. So there is a tremendous opportunity in skilling India, digitally at the professional level. That should be focused on.
So I want to take closing comments then from our panelists today. To cap off the series of 20 masterclasses that we've been doing, yes, it's challenging times for entrepreneurs, but there are opportunities, as all of you on today's panel have pointed out. If you want to leave entrepreneurs who are contemplating whether they should perhaps enter the EdTech space, or someone who's already in the EdTech space saying, I want to expand, what are the opportunities, etc. What is the one piece of advice you'd want to leave our audience with today? Let me come to you first, Gerald.
All right, I'm going to say something that's not very exciting. Don't get into EdTech because you want great funding and great valuation. Get into it because you want to make a difference to the healthcare ecosystem or to the education ecosystem. My apologies. Find the right reason to get it.
Okay, Shweta?
All right, I would say that yes, EdTech is the new, I would say, exciting sector as far as the startup ecosystem is concerned. As I said, there are investments that are happening across the board, very interesting and innovative models that have come up. And I think my advice is that there is a huge untapped potential and opportunity out there. So whether it is incumbents or it is new entrants and new players, go ahead, innovate at scale. Don't even be restricted by the opportunity that you think there is.
All right, out of time on today's masterclass. Thank you very much to our panelists today. That was part 2 of our masterclass talking about the pandemic impact on the EdTech space. If you have any questions for us, do let us know. Our contact details coming up on your screens as we speak. This wraps up the series of 20 masterclasses, but there's so much more that we continue doing and innovating on a daily basis on the Leaders of Tomorrow. For all of that, do head on over to our website. The details coming up on the screens as we speak. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.